Today we will discuss about the parts and functions of the cell. So, what is cell? Cells are the basic buildings blocks of all living organisms. The human body is composed of structure for the body, take in nutrients from food, convert those nutrients into energy, and specialized functions. Cells also contain the body's hereditary material and can make copies of themselves. So there are over 200 different cell types in the human body. Each type of cells is carry out a particular functions, either solely but usually by forming a particular then combine and form specific organs, where the organs is like a part factory where every type of cell has its own job. So all cells have the same basic structure, but there are some components that appear in some cells and are absent from other. So the cell is considered to be the basic structural unit of living organisms. It is the minimum amount of organized living matter capable of growing and multiplying. So, next. Since every tissue has its own function that contributes to the multifunctionality of an organ, every type of cell is equally important. So, there are two main types of cells, the prokaryote and the eukaryotes. Example of prokaryote is bacterium, while the eukaryotes is plant cell and animal cell. So next, prokaryotes. Prokaryotes are unicellular organisms that lack membrane-bound structures. The most noteworthy of which is the nucleus. Prokaryotic cells tend to be small, simple cells. So one of the there are examples of prokaryotes. It's the bacteria and archaea are the two types of prokaryotes. So next, prokaryotic cell features. Nucleus, a central region of the cell that contain its DNA. So ayan siya. This one, the red, ito ang nuclide. So next, ribosomes. Ribosomes are responsible for protein synthesis. So, makikita natin, very tiny. This one is the ribosomes. Are very tiny sphere, visible only through an electron microscope, that play a role in protein synthesis. So, next, cell wall. The cell wall provides structure and protection from the outside environment. Most bacteria have a rigid cell wall made from carbohydrates and proteins called peptidoglycans. So, next, cell membrane. Every prokaryote has a cell membrane, also known as the plasma membrane, that separates the cell from the outside environment. So, next is capsule. Some bacteria have a layer of carbohydrates that surrounds the cell wall called the capsule. So this one is the capsule. the color blue. The capsule helps the bacterium attach to surface. So, next tayo. Fimbriae are thin hair-like structures that help with cellular attachment. So, next is pili are rod-shaped structures involved in multiple roles including attachment and DNA transfer. So, this one is the pili. So, marami sila pili. Flagella is a tail-like structure that assists in movement. So, this one, the flagellum. It's a tail-like structure. Diba? Ayan siya. So, next. Eukaryotes are organisms whose cells have a nucleus and other organelles enclosed by a plasma membrane. Organelles are internal structure responsible for a variety of functions such as energy production and protein synthesis. So this is the eukaryote. So next, eukaryotic cell features. Within a eukaryotic cell, each membrane-bound structure carries out specific cellular function. So, the nucleus stores the genetic information in chromatin form. So, nucleolus, found inside of the nucleus, is the part of eukaryotic cells where ribosomal RNA is produced. So, this is the nucleolus. Siya ang uh, doon makikita where the ribosomal RNA is produced. So, next. Plasma membrane. The plasma membrane is a phospholipid bilayer that surrounds the entire cell and encompasses the organelles within. Cytoskeleton or cell wall provides structure, allows the cell movement, and plays a role in cell division. So, yan. Kita natin dito. This one is the plasma membrane and yan siya. Saan na yun? This one. Next. Ribosomes are responsible for protein synthesis. Mitochondria. Mitochondria, also known as the powerhouse of the cell, are responsible for energy production. So, ribosomes are very tiny spheres that play a role in protein synthesis. So, mitochondria are spheres or small rods that contain the enzyme that are responsible for the oxidation of food. Energy production siya. So, this one is the mitochondria and this one is the ribosomes. So, next. Cytoplasm is the region of the cell between the nuclear envelope and plasma membrane. Cytosol is a gel-like substance within the cell that contains the organelles. So, next. Endoplasmic reticulum is an organelle dedicated to protein maturation and transportation. Vesicles and vacuoles are membrane-bound sacs involved in transportation and storage. The endoplasmic reticulum is a system of membranes that sometimes carries attached ribosomes. So, this one is the endoplasmic reticulum. So, minsan siya din ang uh, nagkikarry ng attach ng ribosome. The vesicles. So, next. What other components do cells have? A cell cytoplasm is home to numerous functional and structural elements. These elements exist in the form of molecules and organelles. Picture them as the tools, appliances, and inner rooms of the cell. Major classes of intracellular organic molecules include nucleic acids, proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids, all of which are essential to cells' function. Nucleic acids are the molecules that contain and help express a cell's genetic code. There are two major classes of nucleic acids, the deoxyribonucleic acid or the DNA, and the ribonucleic acid, the RNA. DNA is the molecule that contains all of the information required to build and maintain the cell. RNA has several roles associated with expression of the information stored in DNA. Of course, nucleic acids alone aren't responsible for the preservation and expression of genetic material. Cells also use proteins to help replicate the genome and accomplish the profound structural changes that underlie cell divisions. So next. So the other one of the most important components of a cell is the membrane, which sometimes is provided with a rigid wall. The membrane has a double function. It has to insulate the interior from the exterior, but at the same time, it has to allow an exchange of material between cell and the environment that surrounds it. Therefore, it's semi-permeable. This means that it allows certain substances and materials to pass through but not others. So, yun. What are the different categories of cells? Rather than grouping cells by their size or shape, scientists typically categorize them by how their genetic material is packaged. If the DNA within a cell is not separated from the cytoplasm, then that cell is a prokaryote. For instance, example, all plants and animals are made of eukaryotic cells, sometimes even trillions of them. So, next. All non-prokaryotes such as bacteria and archaea are single cells. In contrast, if the DNA is partitioned off in its own membrane-bound room, called the nucleus, then that cell is a some eukaryotes like amoeba are free-living single-celled entities. Other eukaryotic cells are part of multicellular organisms. So, example of Eukaryotes are animals, plants, fungi, algae, and protozoans are all eukaryotes. So, how did cells originate? Researchers hypothesize that all organisms on Earth today originated from a single cell that is existed some 3.5 to 3.8 billion years ago. This original cell was likely little more than a sack of small organic molecules and RNA-like material that had both informational and catalytic functions. So, next. Over time, the more stable DNA molecule evolved to take over the information storage function, whereas proteins with a greater variety of structures than nucleic acid took over the catalytic functions. So, so, all cells, whether prokaryotic or eukaryotic, share these four features: the plasma membrane, the plasma membrane, cytoplasms, and ribosomes. So the cells are the smallest common denominator of life. Some cells are organisms unto themselves. Others are part of multicellular organisms. All cells are made the same major classes of organic molecules: the nucleic acids, proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. In addition, cells can be placed in two major categories as a result of ancient evolutionary events: the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes, with their nuclear encased genomes and other membrane-bound organelles. They, though they are small, cells have evolved into a vast variety of shapes and sizes. Together, they form tissues that themselves form organs and eventually entire organisms. So, the cell is uh, considered to be the basic structural unit of all living beings. It is the minimum amount of organized living matter that is capable of growing and multiplying. So, cells this have the same basic structure, but there are some components that appear in some cells and are absent from others. So, pag mapapansin nyo, meron yung isa, while the kabila naman is wala, like the plant and the animal cells. So, thank you for listening.